All right. I have one little, perhaps a rant, or this will probably end up ending in a rant for sure. I wanted to say this and then I'll probably stop putting these out for a little bit unless they're like education based. Unless they're history or culture based, because I need to get back to my studies and focusing on my research papers and getting my teaching credentials. Because, as I've told some people, I have decided to become a history or geography teacher. History and geography and culture, like anthropology in general, has been a passion of mine, especially cultural anthropology as it relates to love, marriage, kinship, gender roles across cultures, and linguistics too. I'm a super fan of linguistics. I love studying languages, learning languages, especially Turkic languages. I really love how they're like connected to each other. Yeah, so I have this one thing to say because I feel like a lot of people don't really know the difference between all these different groups in the Middle East, like the Taliban and Al Qaeda. Like, I feel like they think they're all the same or that they're all connected, and they're actually not. They're all different and unique, and they all, like, most of them oppose each other, right? So, um, the Taliban and Al Qaeda are especially lumped together for some reason because we fought two so called wars on terror, one against the Taliban and one against Al Qaeda. The Taliban did not plan the 9/11 attacks, fund them, train the hijackers, participate in execution or logistics. The attacks were carried out by Al Qaeda. This was a separate organization led by Osama bin Laden. Now, the Taliban had allowed Osama bin Laden to live in Afghanistan since probably the late 1990s after he was expelled from Sudan. He had a base of operations in the country with limited support from Taliban leadership. Now, the reason for this is that the Taliban saw bin Laden as a guest under Pashtun tribal code that protects guests. Now, Turkic people have this same concept of guest, and I'm sure Arabs have it too. But essentially, you always host your guest with hospitality. Like, you don't leave them stranded. You take care of them. So it's not like they even knew what bin Laden was all about or what he was planning or any of that. It's quite possible that he didn't share that information with them. I mean, part of that reason is because the Taliban, which I will explain later, doesn't want anything to do with the West. It never has. Afghanistan has always been a type of country that has just fought for their independence. They don't want anything to do with foreign influence or interference. So if they knew what Osama bin Laden was planning, they may have politely asked him to leave because they've been the type of country that Western countries and even Russia at some point too, these colonist countries have always tried to come and exploit them. So they wouldn't want anything to invite that in, so to speak. So I think if they would have known about this, knowing what I know about them and their culture, they probably were not harboring him. They were probably just letting him live there. They saw him as a guest. I'm pretty sure that's all they saw him as. However, the Taliban did not approve of the 9/11 attacks in advance. Many reports actually suggest they were caught off guard and were kind of shocked by it. Many people do not realize that Al Qaeda and the Taliban are very two distinct groups. Al Qaeda is a stateless terrorist group that operated in many countries. For example, Saudi Arabia, United States, and Germany, which this alone should be eye opening in itself. This particular group is operating right under the nose of the people who are supposedly against them, which is just ridiculous when you think about it. It's like these countries who have very especially the United States, who supposedly has this top notch intelligence organization, and they're operating right under their nose. It just doesn't make sense, does it? The Taliban is a local Islamist political movement. At the time, it had no global ambitions. In fact, the people of Afghanistan have always wanted to be left alone. They have always stood quite strongly against foreign occupation, exploitation, and influence. Afghanistan was called the place where empires go to die because they have always powerfully resisted Western invaders and Russian looking to take the resources of their land and the great world political and economic game. Simply put, they have never wanted anything to do with any of it. Say what you want about the Taliban. They might be somewhat medieval in their views, or antiquated, I guess is a nice way to put it, but they just want to be left alone. They don't want other countries playing games with them or using them as pawns or exploiting their land or causing chaos among their people. They just want to chill. They just want to live like in the old days. Think of them as the Quakers of Islamic society. Something like that. Something very traditional, very old fashioned. They don't care as much as modernization. Now, that's not to say that all Afghanistan people are like that. They're not. I'm talking about the Taliban themselves. But they are the ones who are always defending the country against Western imperialism and invasion, or foreign imperialism and foreign invasion. They are the ones who are defending their land against foreign imperialism, foreign invasion, foreign exploitation. So there's a lot of people in Afghanistan who, even if they don't agree with everything that the Taliban is about, you will find people who respect them and who know that they're a good line of defense against invaders, essentially. There are only the powerful and elite in Afghanistan who may be aligned with Western politics because they know that they can be empowered and enriched by them. But the Taliban will have none of that. They refuse to be a puppet. So you got some people who totally respect that. So after 9/11, the Taliban actually offered to hand over bin Laden if the US provided evidence that he was responsible for the 9/11 attacks. The Bush administration actually rejected this offer, demanding unconditional surrender of bin Laden and launching an invasion instead. So I really doubt Bush or anybody on his cabinet or team or whatever is not educated in Middle Eastern culture or Central Asian culture and Islamic customs and values. You just don't hand over somebody to someone else, especially a Muslim, without evidence or any type of anything like proving that they did what they said. So this was used as a way for the US to be like, well, they're just playing games with us, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to play their game. We reject your offer. You hand them over without conditions, or we're going to invade. This is a very dominating, bullying tactic. And they're using their Islamic values and customs to be like, no, we're not handing anybody over to you, but we will, but you have to give us some type of evidence or proof. You gotta think that they're running off of their interpretation of law, and Some country or groups take that more seriously than others. They want to have the proof, they want to sign off on it with a Islamic judge or whatever. Whatever. But the United States didn't even try. They just said no, hand them over or else. The Taliban's request for proof was dismissed as stalling or insincerity. Everybody in the anthropology field knows that this isn't stalling or insincerity. This is just the cultural thing there. They're not that stupid. They know it wasn't stalling or insincerity necessarily. They just framed it as that because they already had their agenda, which we'll discuss later. So no solid evidence was ever shared publicly with them before the invasion began. So it became clear to some clever people that this was just an excuse for another attempt at invading and occupying Afghanistan. The American public also wanted retribution for the 9/11 attacks. So the United States easily manufactured consent for an invasion of Afghanistan where bin Laden was living in exile. Afghanistan was simply the easiest visible target. Bin Laden being in Afghanistan when he was an opportunity the United States could not pass up, which I will explain later. It was about getting bin Laden, as he admitted to the attacks. There was his letter to the United States and all of that. But it was much deeper than that. Afghanistan is a gold mine. The Taliban, if they knew this was going to happen and bin Laden was going to do this, that's what I'm saying. They would have politely asked him to leave and go somewhere else. I don't think they would have risked their country because they have this reputation. They've always kicked people out of their country. They've always done this. They sent the British packing, they sent the Russians packing. There's no reason to believe that they can't send the US packing too. It took them a long time, but the United States eventually left. We saw them leave recently, or not that long ago, anyways. I wouldn't say recently anymore, but the United States eventually got the hell out of there because you can't conquer this land. No one can conquer this land. No one can seize it. No one can annex it. No one can occupy it indefinitely. They might for a little bit, but they can't stay there. That's why they call it where the empires go to die. This is a very well known title among historians. So the United States easily manufactured consent, as they usually do. The military industrial complex had been eyeing Central Asia for years. Pipeline access, rare minerals, and the strategic positioning of Afghanistan is ideal for the US to have a military base or operations there, right? Invading Afghanistan was also a geopolitical opportunity which would allow the US to establish a footprint in this strategic region because it was near Iran, Russia, and China. I mean, it's just in a good spot. Just like the Turks are in a good spot, Afghanistan is also in a good spot. So the Taliban were not responsible for 9/11, but they were made out to be guilty by association by the US government because they refused to hand over bin Laden without conditions. This was all part of a much darker agenda where elites saw an opportunity to exploit in order to enrich themselves, as usual. What followed was a 20-year war, the deaths of hundreds of thousands, even American soldiers, many American soldiers, and trillions of dollars were spent, all based on that one refusal and a conflation of Taliban with Al Qaeda, Western imperialism, greed, lust for power, and global dominance. The US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 had far more geopolitical and economic motivations than just bringing bin Laden to justice, quote unquote. While rarely admitted publicly, Afghanistan's opium economy was a massive factor. Before the US invasion, the Taliban had nearly eradicated opium production. They banned it for religious reasons. After the US invasion, opium production exploded under the US backed Afghan government. By 2007, Afghanistan was producing over 90% of the world's opium. Much of it is from regions controlled by US allied warlords. Do you have any idea how much money was involved? How much money was made with this opium trade, and how it is a direct connection or responsibility for the opium crisis in the United States today? I mean, essentially, the politicians who talk about this opium crisis like it's such a tragedy are the same MFers that created and caused it in the first place. And they would do it all over again if they had the chance. They are all the same. They are all cut from the same cloth. Obama, Trump, Biden, Bush, they are all the same. Let's also not ignore the fact that the CIA and other intelligent networks have a long, dark history of being connected to drug trafficking routes. Under US occupation, the poppy fields came back and the profits flowed. Surprise, surprise. A 2010 US Geological Survey revealed over 1 trillion in untapped mineral resources in Afghanistan, including lithium used in batteries and electronics, copper, gold, cobalt, iron ore, and rare earth elements. Internal Pentagon memos even referred to Afghanistan as the Saudi Arabia of lithium. With China dominating global rare earth production, Afghanistan became a tempting site for US influence and extraction. And exploitation. Let's just throw that word in there too. Let's also acknowledge that the US had long wanted to build the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline to transport natural gas from the Caspian Sea without involving Iran or Russia. The Taliban regime had refused US and Western oil company proposals in the late 1990s, as they were always wont to do, as they hated foreign interference. Once the Taliban were removed, the US hoped to secure the region for these energy corridors. It's common knowledge that controlling energy routes means controlling global power dynamics. Afghanistan also sits in a geopolitically strategic location between Iran, China, and Pakistan, which is considered Russia's sphere of influence. By occupying Afghanistan, the US could install military bases, surround Iran, keep an eye on China's Belt and Road Initiative, and influence Central Asian energy markets. Central Asia is very rich in natural gas and energy sources. And if you think about it, they have a lot of land that is uncorrupted and untouched. Like, they have a lot of nature there still. They don't have these, I mean, they do have big metropolitan like cities and stuff, but the countries are so large and vast and uninhabited that a lot of their land has not been destroyed. This is why they're so rich in resources, because the rest of the world has exploited their environment almost to the destruction of them. This is why they're so sought after by Russia, by the United States, by China. They want to tap into this wealth and the resources of these lands. So after the Cold War, military spending in the US was shrinking. 9/11 revitalized the defense industry. The war on terror gave endless justification for drone programs, private contractors like Blackwater, who are enriched by these wars, surveillance expansion, and billions in no bid defense contracts. Afghanistan was a gold mine, not just for minerals, but for arms manufacturers, security firms, and nation building grifters. So, next time you hear some idiot spewing stupidity about how countries like Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan are worthless, just know that this person is an uneducated moron who probably has the mentality, sophistication, comprehension, and intelligence of a 10-year-old. You're not dealing with a historian, you're dealing with a walking bumper sticker. This is the kind of person whose grasp of world history couldn't fill a thimble and whose worldview was probably shaped by action movies and Facebook memes. Meanwhile, the places they dismiss as backwards are the cradles of civilization, literal birthplaces of writing, math, astronomy, literature, and architecture, with empires that thrived for millennia before the United States even existed as a half baked colonial tantrum. They're sitting on some sofa within a 250-year-old settler state built on genocide and chattel slave labor, talking down to nations with 5,000 years of history and more material wealth and cultural depth than they can comprehend if you drew them a map and sang it in a jingle. Honestly, some of these countries have more runes with more dignity and legacy than the average nationalist has IQ points. Thanks for listening.